The night it happened, emotions across Iran were a fierce storm, anger, grief, and shock burning like embers in everyone's hearts. In the silent darkness, the sky was split by ballistic missiles. They rained down on Israeli soil, part of Operation Veda Sadiq III, Iran's fierce and symbolic answer to the Wednesday air raids. Iran retaliated swiftly, launching over 100 ballistic missiles at Israel. These weren't just weapons, they were a declaration. Iranian scientists, commanders, and innocent civilians had died, and Iran would avenge this blood with force. According to Iranian media, 2 Israeli warplanes were shot down. One pilot, revealed to be a woman, ejected safely but was captured. At least 22 Israeli soldiers were reported injured, some critically wounded. The skies over Tehran, Mashhad, Tabriz, Isfahan, and other cities buzzed with drones and missile launches, a national outcry swelling into a public spectacle. Streets filled with mourning crowds, families who had recently buried loved ones now celebrated the strike. Some carried the Iranian flag wrapped around their shoulders. Others wore kaftans in remembrance, symbolically joining the martyrs. Their chants and prayers filled the air. Iran had not responded with empty words, but with action. I'm Yasser Rashid, and you are watching 92 Digital, where we bring you truth behind the headlines. This hail of missiles came just days after Friday's surprise Israeli strike on Iran's military and nuclear sites, killing 78 people, including 6 scientists. Israel had believed this assault would crush Iran's breath, but Iran rose defiantly. They announced that no suffering would go unanswered. For years, Iran has vowed vengeance, first for the death of General Qasem Soleimani, then for President Ebrahim Raisi's helicopter accident, and citations of previous hosts like Ismail Haniyeh. Each time, Tehran promised retribution, but walked back. This time was different. Iran's Air Force launched its missiles and drones, none returned unanswered. Even advanced defense systems like Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Third Layer were overwhelmed. The message, words were no longer enough. Iran would fire missiles onto enemy soil to prove its resolve. Iranian media now emphasizes a strategic shift, from retaliation in name to retaliation with action. Tehran claims it downed 2 advanced F-35 jets, 1 pilot, a woman, safely ejected and captured alive. That scene has become a symbol of Iran's resurgence in military capability and technological prowess. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei addressed the nation with fiery determination. The Zionist enemy has been dealt with, he declared, urging unity and warning that Israel would pay a steep price. His tone was direct, resolute. Iran would not retreat. Civil or military, no Israeli target would be exempt. Commanders, civilians, infrastructure, all would be considered in retaliation. This moment marks a turning point. Iran is declaring it won't allow Israel or its allies to strike with impunity. Systems once thought impenetrable, Iron Dome, Patriot, David's Sling, were challenged. The glimmer of invincibility in Israeli defense has been shattered. Now, with missiles launched and defenses tested, the question is no longer if, but who can stop this fire? Iran's announcement is clear. This is not rhetoric, it is a battlefield reality. The morning after Iran's attack, Israel woke up not to the usual calm but to a storm of chaos. The country's famed missile defense systems had been tested and bruised. Across Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Beersheba, smoke still lingered in the air. Sirens that had howled all night were replaced by the low hum of drones overhead and the distant rumble of ambulances. Emergency rooms were flooded. At least 22 Israeli soldiers were confirmed injured, many with burns, shrapnel wounds, or traumatic brain injuries from missile blasts. A few civilians were also reported dead after Iranian drones evaded defenses and struck civilian infrastructure. In Ashkelon, a gas facility was hit. In Herzliya, footage showed a flaming apartment complex. Even in Jerusalem, considered one of the best defended cities on earth, shockwaves from intercepted missiles shattered windows and nerves. For the first time in years, Israelis saw their country bleed from the sky. The Israeli government, usually swift in narrative control, hesitated. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cancelled public appearances and convened emergency war cabinet meetings. Rumors circulated of a second, more powerful Iranian strike pending. The IDF went on full alert. But perhaps most shocking was Iran's capture of a female Israeli fighter pilot. According to Iran's Fars news agency, the woman ejected from a downed F-35 over the Golan Heights and parachuted into territory monitored by Iranian proxy groups. Within hours, footage of her being detained, blindfolded, surrounded by Revolutionary Guards, was broadcast on Iranian state TV. It sent shockwaves through Israel and raised the stakes of the confrontation. Her name has not been confirmed by the IDF, but Israeli social media exploded with speculation. Military analysts noted that if true, this would be the first time in decades that an Israeli pilot, especially a woman, had been captured alive. Iran's propaganda machine was swift. Posters appeared in Tehran reading, "She bombed our children. Now she'll answer for it." The image of her capture became both a trophy and a warning. The symbolism was unmistakable. Technology alone cannot save a nation that ignores its crimes. Globally, the response was frantic. The United States immediately condemned the attack but stopped short of announcing direct military retaliation. President Trump, now in his second term, tweeted, "The world cannot afford another war. But Israel has the right to defend itself." Behind the scenes, reports leaked that U.S. aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean were moving closer to Israel's shores. Russia urged restraint, but praised Iran's measured response. China warned both countries to de-escalate but issued a quiet statement condemning the targeting of civilian infrastructure by both parties. The United Nations Security Council called for an emergency session. Diplomats scrambled to prevent what many feared could evolve into a full-scale regional war, one that could drag in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and the Gulf states. In Tel Aviv, supermarkets were emptied. People lined up at gas stations, fearing fuel shortages. Parents pulled children from schools. Even Iron Dome commanders confessed, "We're not used to this level of intensity." Iran's missiles were accurate. Too accurate. As smoke rose above Israeli skies and the world watched with bated breath, one thing became clear: this was no longer a cold war of threats and proxies. It was real. It was direct. And it had only just begun. By the evening of the second day, the question wasn't if Israel would respond, but how brutally. For decades, Israel's defense doctrine has rested on one core principle: overwhelming deterrence. Any direct strike on Israeli soil, especially by a sovereign nation like Iran, demands a response not just for defense, but for reputation. And so, on June 11th, just 30 hours after the first Iranian drones entered Israeli airspace, the IDF launched Operation Iron Judgment, a coordinated, high-precision strike deep into the heart of Iran. The opening salvo was devastating. Using F-35 stealth jets refueled midair by U.S.-supplied tankers, Israel struck multiple high-value targets across Iran. In Isfahan, explosions rocked a suspected nuclear enrichment facility, though Iran quickly denied any damage. In Tehran, the Ministry of Defense building was hit, causing fires and mass evacuations. And in Shiraz, an IRGC drone warehouse was reduced to ash. Israeli cyber units also went on the offensive. Internet blackouts hit several Iranian cities. Banking systems froze. Screens in Tehran's metro stations displayed the Israeli flag and a message in Farsi. "You started this. We will end it." But the most controversial part of the retaliation came hours later. At approximately 3:30 a.m. local time, Israeli missiles struck the home of Qasem Soleimani's successor, General Esmail Qani, leader of Iran's elite Quds force. Iranian media initially claimed Qani survived. But by morning, state TV switched to somber prayers and patriotic anthems. The implication was clear: Israel had taken out one of the most powerful men in Iran's military hierarchy. The mood in Iran shifted instantly, from celebration to fury. Crowds gathered in Tehran's Azadi Square, chanting, "Death to Israel! Death to America!" Funeral marches began even before confirmation of Qani's death was made public. Meanwhile, inside Israel, The mood was a mix of vengeance and dread. Israeli officials framed the operation as a calibrated response. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated, "Our message to Tehran is simple: we will hit you harder than you can imagine. Every time. Everywhere." But international observers noted that this was no mere tit for tat. This was a direct escalation. Even traditional allies of Israel grew uneasy. The European Union called for maximum restraint. India, Brazil, and South Korea urged both countries to back down. The U.S. State Department, while reaffirming Israel's right to self-defense, warned against a prolonged regional conflict. But Netanyahu's war cabinet saw things differently. For them, this was a once-in-a-generation opportunity to cripple Iran's military machine, especially after years of clandestine battles and proxy wars. And just when it seemed like things couldn't escalate further, Hezbollah fired a barrage of rockets from southern Lebanon. The northern front was now wide open. The Middle East had entered a new era, no longer a chessboard of shadows and deniability, but a battlefield of direct state-on-state war. The world awoke in disbelief. News of Israel's retaliatory strike against Iran was splashed across every screen, from Times Square to Tiananmen. What had started as a shocking drone assault had now become a spiraling regional war. Markets plunged. Oil prices shot past $150 a barrel, the highest since the 2008 crisis. Stock markets in Europe, Asia, and North America saw a $1 trillion wipeout in 24 hours. Airlines canceled flights to the Middle East. Embassies went into lockdown. This wasn't just a conflict between two countries, it was a threat to the global order. In Washington, President Biden addressed the nation from the White House. "We urge restraint from both parties. The United States stands with Israel's right to defend itself, but we do not seek a broader war. We are working with our allies to de-escalate the situation immediately." But behind the scenes, things were far from calm. U.S. officials scrambled to establish back-channel communications with both Tehran and Jerusalem. American naval assets in the Persian Gulf were placed on high alert. Patriot missile systems were quietly deployed to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan to brace for fallout. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a rare condemnation of both sides, stating, "This conflict threatens the stability of Asia and the world. All military actions must cease immediately."